Hello and welcome to the Gameweek 5 edition of the FPL Scope podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matthias, and with me today I have Kevin, who is pretty fed up with the international break, I'm sure, especially seeing as it didn't go so well for Sweden. So how excited are you to get back into FPL and Premier League and all European competition outside of the international games, finally?
Yeah, I mean, this has just been a distraction from the real prize, which is club football. So for me, I'm very excited to see everything again, especially considering the disappointment of Sweden against Austria, especially considering the fact that we went into the game with good confidence. It's really frustrating. It seems like the concurrent thing of my life right now, suffering as an Evertonian, suffering as a Swede. Barcelona, okay. Helsingborg, Jesus Christ. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But very excited to get things going again.
It's not going so well for our Norwegian team either. So Norway did well, but Vålerenga, my favorite team, and your now favorite Norwegian team as well, not doing so well, but we're turning things around. So yeah, but FPL going slightly better, I guess. Like, we've had decent starts to the season. Especially, I'm pretty happy with my season. I'm pretty happy with the team that I have as well going forward. But we did talk about our scores last game week in the podcast a week ago. So if you want to check out what happened in game week 4, you can check out that podcast from a week ago. But today we're going to do a little bit different in the intro. Usually we go through the scores, but seeing as we've done that already, we're going to do something slightly different, because I've been looking into some stats and stuff during the international break just to see if I could find some info that is interesting. And this is actually one of the things that it's not really something that I discovered during the international break, but it's something that I found really interesting and that I just want people's opinions about it. But these are basically the numbers of Andrew Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold for Liverpool since they both joined. They pretty much joined Liverpool around the same time. 17-18 was sort of Arnold's breakthrough season, and it was also Robertson's sort of breakthrough season with Liverpool. And from that point on, they've been fantastic as the fullback pairing for Liverpool, getting loads of assists and getting loads of chances created. But as you can see from the numbers here, in terms of expected assists, Robertson has about 33.6 expected assists these 6 seasons, while Trent Alexander-Arnold has 48.1. So there's a difference of about 14.5 expected assists here. But I want to ask you, how many assists do you think total these guys had throughout these 6 seasons? Like, how many did Robertson have and how many did Trent have? If you look at
Am
these
I meant
numbers.
to guess? Am I meant to guess total, or am I
Total.
meant to guess?
The
Okay.
total number of assists for these 6 seasons.
FPL assists. FPL assists or regular assists?
These are just regular assists, but FPL assists is pretty similar. I think I don't think it's that much of a difference either.
I'd say Robertson.
So
Low 40s.
Yeah, so it's 6 seasons, so 6 assists per season would be 36 for like a reference point.
I'd still think it's higher than that, because I know there's seasons where they got like 10 each. So I'd say high 30s, low 40s for Robertson, and I'd say mid 40s to even 50 plus for Trent. I might be overly generous, but yeah, those are my guesses.
50 plus for Trent is actually not overly generous. That is actually kind of spot on. But what's kind of shocking is the fact that Robertson has pretty much the exact same.
Damn, okay.
So Robertson, from 33.6 expected assists, he has 53 assists over the last 6 seasons. And these are not FPL assists. This is like pure assists as well. He has even more, I think, FPL. I haven't checked or didn't double check the numbers, but it's pretty much even, which is kind of interesting because both of these guys have outperformed their expected assists, which I guess is sort of like par for the course when you have really good delivery, like people who have really good delivery. But it's also kind of interesting that I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting like discrepancy. It might be just random. Maybe if you play these 6 seasons over again, maybe Trent is the one that actually has like a higher expected or differential between his assists and expected assists. But I just think it's really interesting that Robertson just keeps producing way more assists than expected assists. While Trent has also done that. He's the past 3 seasons, actually, the past 3 full seasons, he's like slightly underperformed his expected assists. But I just think it's really interesting, and I don't know. What do you think this comes down to? Because obviously, my sort of idea about this is the fact that Trent and Robertson are completely different in terms of playstyle. Robertson is the left or the wingback to like bomb forward and be in the box and be right next to the action and stuff, while Trent is someone who just keeps putting passes in and keeps getting free kicks. I mean, Robertson has had some free kicks as well and corners and stuff, but mostly it's Trent who's been delivering like the long crosses and stuff. So do you think that plays into, like, why do you think that this is a difference? Do you think it's just purely it's not enough sample size, or do you think it's a reason for this difference between these two guys?
I think, funnily enough, I think Robertson's a bit more. If you think about some of the chances that he creates in comparison to Trent, it's way more thorough. I don't know how to, like, I feel that Trent spams crosses, whilst Robertson's very precise when he does a cross, and that's why I think he gets way more assists. And obviously, in terms of playstyle, the one thing that isn't mentioned here is obviously goals. Trent scores more goals as well as because he's more selfish in regards to that. And I think Robertson isn't, which sounds weird considering the fact that I'm saying that Trent spams crosses left and right, which isn't the trait of a selfish player. But I think he is definitely trying to get on the stat sheet, whilst Robertson is just playing his natural game. He's a douchebag, a massive douchebag, but I can't fault the quality.
Yeah, because my thinking was kind of, I think it's faulty when I thought about it like logically, but my thinking was because, you know, expected goals, they don't count expected goals when you don't get a shot off. So I figured Robertson is more in those positions where the pass either goes to the player who has like an open goal and scores, or the pass doesn't reach the player and he doesn't get a shot off, and the expected numbers are not counted. But that doesn't really make sense because he's outperforming his expected assists, and when his passes are going to the player who scores, he gets the expected assist numbers. So it doesn't really make sense that way either. But I don't know. Maybe it's just down to the fact that Trent's like expected assists are more crosses, like you said, and Robertson are more passes to feet. So maybe it's just the fact that Liverpool are better at finishing with their feet than they are finishing with their head, maybe. So maybe it's just a Liverpool thing. But I think it's just interesting to see because Trippier is like a name that's getting talked about a lot now. And he's more the type of Trent Alexander-Arnold type of player who tends to do a lot of crosses, has a lot of free kicks and corners and stuff. Meanwhile, we have some other picks like Estupinian, Udogie, and Matty Cash, who are more kind of Robertson type of players who bomb forward and kind of get into the box. So I don't know, maybe we can get something from this. I don't know, maybe our viewers will have some interesting input on this as well, if they think this will sort of affect what happens with Trippier versus Estupinian, for example. Maybe Trippier has, because Trippier has really good numbers, but maybe he needs better numbers to perform as well as someone like Estupinian to be like the exact same in terms of producing points in FPL. So I don't know. I think it's just a really interesting difference. Maybe it's just random. Maybe we don't really know now because Robertson is going to play more as like a centre back-ish. He's not going to bomb forward as much going forward because of the system that Liverpool play. But yeah, I just think it was really interesting stuff that I just wanted to talk about on this podcast. But yeah, so how do you think about Trippier versus these other guys in terms of FPL going forward? Do you value Trippier? Do you have any interest in Trippier going forward, or is he just like he's too expensive for basically the same that we get for cheaper with Udogie, Estupinian, and those guys?
Yeah, I think is exactly that. I think the biggest issue with Trippier is he's been on a downward spiral. We spoke about this very early on last year as well, and why we were some of the first people to like just get rid of him because we were just like, yeah, it's not worth it anymore. So for that reason, yeah, until he picks it up, and I guess until Newcastle pick it up in general, there's no point. And with the Champions League coming up and they're in the group of death as well, it's going to be very interesting to see how they cope with it all. Hopefully, because Alexander Isak is Swedish, I hope things kind of look better for them. But at the same time, this is make it or break it. You got to show what you got. And, you know, I don't think Newcastle fans are happy with how things have been going in the league as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Newcastle will do this season in general. Like, they've been pretty disappointing so far, but at the same time, they've had really tough matches. So who knows, really? They destroyed Aston Villa in the first game as well. You got to remember that, because that was like huge performance. Aston Villa are a good team, but Newcastle are much better than them. But now the last game week 4, they kind of got pretty much just dominated by Brighton, which is interesting to see. Also could say something about Brighton and how good they are. Maybe we've underrated Brighton as well this season. Like they always lose their best players, but they keep performing really well. So I think it's really interesting. But yeah, we have another kind of different thing for the next segment as well, and this is something that I like to call talisman versus focal point, because I've been talking about this for the last few weeks. Like I think it's kind of interesting to see, like we usually look at fixtures and see like that's a good fixture and that's a bad fixture, and we don't really go much deeper than that, whether it's apart from maybe like this is a good offensive fixture and this is a good defensive fixture. But I think we sort of need to look at it in terms of what is a good fixture for certain types of players, because my thinking has always been the reason that I went into these numbers and looked into this thing at all was the fact that I thought like people like Fernandes and Maddison and Eze and Ødegaard, for example, the talisman that I like to call them, I think these guys will perform better when they are like the dominant team and they're in possession. They get a lot of chances, they get a lot of free kick chances and stuff, and they can really be involved in the point of play. And on the other hand, I feel like the focal points of attack, like the players that are the most attacking and like are the better on the counter sort of players, they will perform better, or at least like comparatively, when they have less possession and they can actually counter and stuff. And looking at the numbers, it actually looks pretty good in terms of what I expected. So this is I can just, if you look at this, I don't know, it's also sometimes hard to really signify or what's a talisman and what's a focal point. For example, Harry Kane, like he's sort of both in a way. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting because in this table, this is looking at their points per match in general, and then their points per match when the possession in that game is less than 50%. And then the final thing, which is this is ranked by, is how much better they did when they had less possession than 50% compared to what they usually do in terms of points per match. And what this table shows, at least, is that players like Martinelli and Son and Barnes perform better than players like, for example, well, Jesus is also someone, he's not really a talisman either, or a focal point, but like, I don't know, it feels like these counter-attack sort of players, Martinelli, Son, it sort of is a given that these guys are better when there's less possession, but I don't know. Is there anything interesting you can see from this table in general, Kevin? Or am I onto something here, do you think? Do you think it's more viable in terms of... I think the best example we have currently is Sheffield United, which is a game that Spurs is expected to be dominant and like have the most possession, be high up in the pitch. I've been making the argument that I think that favors Maddison compared to Son, and that Son is much better in a game against like a more high-pressing team like we saw against Burnley. I think that sort of like... makes Son better against the likes of Burnley, but then Maddison is better against the likes of Sheffield United. I don't know. Is that something that seems plausible to you?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, I think it comes down to, high block, low block, all these sort of things, and teams, how they decide to defend against some of the more dominant teams. And of course, in that regards, it focuses on the attacking abilities of certain players, or certain players being defended a certain way. So yeah, of course, but the issue is then you thinking about this week in, week out, it's gonna become such a headache. But I think it's definitely interesting in terms of this is a game where you should expect someone to perform better than the other. So yeah, definitely, I think this is something that a lot of people might not take into consideration when they make their FPL decisions. They just go, scored last week. Okay, let's get him. Yeah. Sterling, for example.
Or Son this week, for example.
Yeah. One of the more impressive things that I noticed from the table is Ødegaard. He's just performs either way.
Yeah. Ødegaard is basically a fixture proof. Like, he's always really good. He's also has a really good record against the better teams as well, which is interesting. Scored now against Man United, for example. So yeah, he's smack down in the middle of the table, though. And I think it's also kind of interesting that this table ended up being sort of like 50-50. As you can see, like the midpoint of the table, Ødegaard basically performs just as well in terms of the matches where they have high possession and the matches that they have low possession. Meanwhile, on the bottom of the table, you have guys like Maddison, Fernandes, Eze, the talisman of their teams. They perform worse when they have less possession, at least last season. This is all numbers from last season, the full season. But those guys, Fernandes, Maddison, and Eze, perform worse when they have less than 50% possession. Meanwhile, someone like Tony, Martinelli, Heung-min Son, and Harvey Barnes, for example, they perform better when they have less possession. It's also interesting to see, also with speaking of Tony, we also have Mbeumo pretty high up in this list as well, in terms of Mbeumo has outperformed. He has 0.47 more points per match when they have less than 50% possession. And I sort of think this speaks to the way that Brentford set up as well, because you can see both Mbeumo and Tony are pretty high up compared to someone like Crystal Palace, where they have both players really far down. So it tells you something about the teams and how they prefer to play as well. Like Brentford are a really good team against the better teams as well. At least last season, that maybe goes into these numbers. The fact that Brentford had a lot of great results against the better teams. But I think that sort of just suits their style of play. Like Brentford has still been really good this season as well in terms of playing against better teams. Like we saw against Spurs, they got a lot of goals there as well. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see the teams, how it affects teams and how it affects players in terms of playing really good teams and playing really bad teams, because usually it's the best team that has the most possession. So maybe that's a bit of a simple stat, just like looking at possession, but yeah. For example, Man City only had 2 matches where they had less than 50% possession last season, and I think both those matches, because I did look at Haaland and De Bruyne as well, but both those guys just had like 10 plus points in both games, so it didn't really matter, because City, I think that's basically down to City. The matches that City have less than 50% is probably the matches where they score pretty early and they play against a pretty good team. I think it was against Arsenal and Brighton that they had the 2 fixtures where they had less than 50% possession. So yeah, I think that's a bit of an outlier, and I didn't really make sense to have just 2 matches of City in this table. But yeah, either way, I don't know if our viewers get anything from this either, but I just think it's interesting numbers to look at, and yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from this type of table and this type of thinking as well. Because yeah, I was talking about Brentford earlier. We have Mbeumo and Tony performing better when they have less possession, but someone like Mathias Jensen, who is the one who takes all the set pieces and stuff, he performed worse when he had less possession. So again, it kind of points to the fact that maybe the talisman of their team need to have really good fixtures. We've seen that with Eberechi Esse, who I mistakenly sold this game week when they had Wolverhampton to play, and yeah, they had a favorable fixture where they were expected to be like the best team in that game, and Esse performed, which is kind of what you expect from Esse and what you can expect from Palace. But yeah, I think this is just something that I'm going to take into account when I look at future FPL decisions. So yeah, and especially this game week as well with Son versus Maddison. I think personally Maddison is going to do better than Son, but at the same time, it's just one game, so anything can happen really. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting to look at these numbers as well. Yeah, next up we have the results predictions. We talked about this last week, so I'm not going to get too far into the results from last week, also because we didn't really do that well in terms of the predictions. You did perform slightly better than me though, so you even got an even bigger lead, but we'll look into the future instead and look for the predicted results for this upcoming game week 5. And first up, we have the match between Wolverhampton and Liverpool, and we both have pretty big wins for Liverpool. I have 4-1 for Liverpool away against Wolves, and you have 3-1 for Liverpool. So yeah, is this a given? Are Liverpool just going to run through Wolverhampton, or is it something? Because Wolverhampton, I think, were pretty good at home last season and not so good away, so maybe they're better at home, but I don't know. Do you give any chance to Wolverhampton in this fixture at all against Liverpool?
I don't. I simply think just because Liverpool have started pretty strong, they just want to keep it going. They got Thursday night football, so it's all system go in the Premier League. So I think they'll continue that and beat Wolves. Then, as a Evertonian, I'm kind of desperate that they do.
Yeah. I think that's pretty expected as well. I have 4-1. I think Liverpool will basically score a lot of goals. I'm hoping Salah gets a lot of goals because I've kept him all this time. So really hoping that he's going to repay. Well, he's been really good so far, but still waiting for that huge explosion of points from Salah as well. So hopefully that happens against Wolves. Next match is Aston Villa against Crystal Palace, and we both have a 2-goal margin victory for Aston Villa. You have 3-1, so why do you think Crystal Palace will score in this game? Do you think they have any chance to nick the win in total here?
Yeah, I mean, I think people seem to be sleeping on Eduard as well. He's been in really good form. So I think either Eduard or Eze will score against Aston Villa, who've been quite leaky. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's it. But I still think Aston Villa have the sort of quality to put them away and make sure that they get the win. So yeah, I still think that Aston Villa will win, but I think Crystal Palace have some players in good momentum to score.
Yeah, I can see that happening as well. I have 2-0 for Aston Villa and you have 3-1 for Aston Villa. But yeah, I think it could go either way. But I think Aston Villa will win this match. It seems like Aston Villa are pretty good. You can attest to that as an Everton fan. They seem pretty good against like the lesser teams in the league.
Mhm.
Next up, we have a disagreement. It's Fulham against Luton, and I just think Fulham are really bad. Like I know Luton are really bad as well, but yeah, I'm going with 1-1 in this match. I thought about going 0-0 because I don't really rate either of these teams offensively or defensively for that matter. But yeah, I think this will just be a boring like 1-1, really non-consequential FPL result at all. Like I think it's just going to be two like random goal scorers and that's it. Maybe Carlton Morris scores a goal and gets a lot of people on the bandwagon before the double game week. But yeah, you have 2-0 for Fulham. Who do you expect to score the goals for Fulham? Like, what have you seen from Fulham so far that makes you think they'll beat Luton? Or what have you seen from Luton that makes you think they'll lose to Fulham, rather?
I mean, I think Aaron Leno's in fantastic form right
Yeah.
now. I think that's going to be the saving grace for Fulham. I also just think that Fulham are due uh, like a feel good win. You know, of course, the win against Everton was a feel good win in that regards because they definitely didn't deserve that. But I think it's about time that something happens at Craven Cottage that makes them feel good. And if there's any team that they're going to do it against, it's Luton. So that's the only reason. I actually had a 1-1 draw written before I sent it to you, but I
Yeah.
was just like, you know what? I'll, because just because I don't like yourself, I just don't rate either team. So I was just like, you know what?
Go with the home team,
I
pretty
go with the
much.
home team
Yeah.
in this regard. So maybe Luton will beat them at home in the reverse fixture because both teams suck.
Yeah. And going with the home team is something that you've done with Man United playing against Brighton at home.
Yeah, yeah,
But I've gone the other way. Maybe it's just out of hope because I really have a lot in terms of FPL. I really hope Brighton win this game, both
of
because
course.
I've been a huge backer of Estepinian in terms of keeping him, not benching him ever, starting him every game. So I'm hoping they can finally get a clean sheet now against Man United. But I know Brighton, it could go any way or either way because Brighton are a really good team, but at the same time they can also concede a lot of goals. Like they've been really leaky. But yeah, I just think it might just be one of these same games that they had against Newcastle where they just looked like the better team in general. I know it's away from home, but still, I think Brighton are just in a better like moment in time now than Man United. So that's why I've gone with 2-0 for Brighton away against Man United. But you've gone with the home win, 2-1 for Man United. So are you certain about this? Do you feel like you're pretty confident about Man United winning? Do you think Brighton have any chance of winning, or do you think it's more likely a draw? Or what do you think about this match in general?
I mean, it's really tough considering the fact that Man United do not deserve me. Well, that's a bit dramatic, but they don't deserve, getting the credit that I think they'll get it across the line. However, Bruno Fernandes has looked great for Portugal. You
Yeah,
know, he's very much main character syndrome. Whenever things like that happens to him, he tends to take it on stride and just do incredible things. And I think United fans, United as a club and as a team, will feel hard done by with the Arsenal result that, they were just offside. They probably should have gotten a penalty for Rasmus Højlund and all this type of thing. So there's a lot going against them currently. And of course, with the Brighton loss back in the day and also losing twice to Brighton last season, it's going to play a lot in their minds and they're definitely going to go into this game trying to win it. So I think there's a lot more riding for Brighton considering the fact that they are in such good form. However, I think United have to sort of show some face and
yeah.
get the win. So that's why I think they'll just about edge out a win. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be surprised if Brighton end up winning it either, but I don't think it's going to end in a draw. As simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting game, and I'm gonna watch that. Definitely gonna watch West Ham at the same time because yeah, I'm a West Ham fan. Obviously, they play Man City, which is a huge game. It's basically the Super Cup between the Conference League champions and the Champions League champions. But we'll get to that game later. But I think I will have Man United Brighton on at the same time as well. I'm going to watch both games, and yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to watch. But before we get to West Ham Man City, like a big top game, we have Spurs against Sheffield United, and we both have pretty much the same idea here. 3-0 for Spurs, easy win. We usually have Sheffield United losing and not scoring a goal, but Sheffield United, to their credit, have scored goals in pretty much every game so far. So yeah, what do you think about the clean sheet chances for Spurs? We both have 3-0 here for Spurs, but can you see Sheffield United scoring?
Yeah, and it will be a FPL player on my bench doing so because it's going to be Cameron Archer. Because I like him at Villa. I like what I've seen of him at Sheffield United so far. Well, I didn't like what I saw.
Yeah, scoring against Everton. Yeah,
but he is a quality player, and I think a really good purchase. And it's a shame that he's doomed himself to the Championship by going to Sheffield. But in regards to that, I think they're not very good away from home. So that's why I think Spurs will finally have a pretty dominant win and seal the deal. I mean, Ange just said some fun things across the line. I'm really sad about Richarlison like up going like I need professional help and all this type of stuff to get myself into the groove again. So hopefully he can nick a final winning goal or you know like not a consolation goal, but rather just the dagger with the 3-0 goal or something like that. So that's why I think Spurs are going to ride a high and get that clean sheet. And Adogi is just that guy currently. And Pedro Porro. I think it's actually really difficult to pick between the two because Pedro Porro likes to shoot more than Adogi does. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game. And I think people who have gone without Spurs asset for this long, this is going to be the game that costs you dearly.
Yeah, I think Pedro Porro would be someone that I'm interested in as well if he was more nailed. Like we know that Emerson Royal is just never letting go of playing as a right back for Spurs. Like he always finds a way to play there. Meanwhile, Udogie doesn't really have any competition for places with Reguilon going to Man United and Ben Davis being Ben Davis really. So yeah, I think Udogie is the better pick out of those two. But Pedro Porro, if you can get him at the right time, he is a really good pick as well. Maybe doubling up as well if you don't have both Son and Maddison. That is potentially an option as well. But yeah, I think Spurs will beat Sheffield United pretty easily. But then we have the big highlight game of the weekend. The two best teams in the league currently. Almost. West Ham are fourth or something now, I think. But still, West Ham were top of the league last Friday or 2 Fridays ago, I guess. And they did win the UEFA Conference League last season, and City won the Champions League. So we got the Super Cup between City and Sevilla, the Europa League winners. But now we get the proper Super Cup, or the like smaller Super Cup, I guess, between West Ham and Man City. But once again, I'm backing against West Ham because that has worked for me this whole season. West Ham have outperformed my predictions, and yeah, once again, especially this week playing against Man City, I'm gonna go with the Man City win. I probably would do that even if it wasn't for the jinxing thing. But yeah, I have 2-0 for Man City. I think they'll keep the clean sheets. Maybe. Now that I'm saying it, probably not thinking that. Maybe I'm leaning more towards your guess of 2-1. But yeah, who could you see scoring for West Ham? And yeah, 2-1. Do you think there's a chance that West Ham might once again sort of shock the world?
No.
No.
No, I just because City are in such a good groove of things. You know, a lot of people would have thought that they'd have champions fatigue, but they've shown that under Pep, it's a regime. You eat, sleep, win the Premier League, repeat. So, yeah, I don't have as much faith as I've actually shown. Out of the two of us, I'm the one who hasn't been counter jinxing them. I've just had real belief. No, I'm just kidding. So for me, personally, I think this is the one where City gets the win regardless. I mean, I could see a draw, but I don't see a West Ham win, unfortunately. And I think that the future Liverpool right winger Jared Bowen will be scoring the goal.
Yeah. No, he's going to stay with West Ham forever.
I hope. Surely. I hate Liverpool. So.
We'll see. Liverpool actually been like interested in Bowen since before like he had his breakout season for West Ham as well.
Yeah.
So credit to them for that because Bowen is a fantastic player. But yeah, next up we have Newcastle against Brentford. I've gone with 2-2. I'm really impressed with Brentford this season. Just have a lot of faith in them. I do kind of like Newcastle still as a team, even though they've not been performing as well against the better teams. But yeah, I think 2-2, it might be. We both have pretty high scoring games. I have 2-2 and you have 3-2 for Newcastle. Even though Newcastle still have, even against the better teams, they have pretty good, like in terms of underlying stats, in terms of defensively. Expected goals conceded, they're pretty low on that as well still. But they always seem to concede goals, and Brentford always seem to score goals. So yeah, I think 2-2 is a decent result here. But it is Newcastle at St. James's Park. So you gone with 3-2 for Newcastle. Pretty even game, but yeah, how do you see this game happening, really, or panning out?
I think something's got to give for Newcastle. Like you said, they've had tough games, and no discredit to Brentford, but Brentford have been pretty inconsistent in their play too, especially with the random draw that they got to Bournemouth at home. So I think Newcastle have to try and edge this before the Champions League game, and what better way to go into the group of death with a win from the weekend? So, yeah, I think they're gonna just about edge it out. And Buemo's gonna score a brace. I'm gonna be happy. So yeah, and Isak can get the winner. Sure.
Fair enough. It's hard to get a winner when you get subbed off after 60 minutes, though. But
Shut up.
maybe this
Shut
time,
up.
maybe this time
Shut.
it's Will.
Shut.
Maybe
Shut
Wilson
up.
is starting this time and Isak comes on to score. I love Isak. You know how much I love Isak, but
That's slander in
he
my
keeps
eyes.
getting subbed off because of Eddie Howe being weird. I don't know. But yeah, maybe he can score as a guy off the bench, or maybe he can score the winner before 60 as well. Who knows? But yeah, next match we have Bournemouth against Chelsea, and yeah, Chelsea have a pretty abysmal record for the last like 20 Premier League games. I think they have like 2 wins or something in the last 20 Premier League games. And one of those wins was against Luton this year, but the other win was against Bournemouth last season. They beat Bournemouth 3-1, and that's the same result that I gone with. I think they beat them 3-1, I'm pretty sure. And that's the same result that I gone with this time around. 3-1 for Chelsea. I think Chelsea will bounce back again, because everyone seems to be like so down on Chelsea after they lost against Nottingham Forest, which, to be fair, I guess it makes sense, because Nick Jackson as well missed a big chance. People are pretty down on him. But yeah, I think against Bournemouth, this is usually the game where Sterling scores. I'm going to keep Sterling this week, hoping that he scores, and I think he will. And I'm guessing 3-1 for Chelsea, because I think Bournemouth are just kind of there for the taking currently. They're conceding a lot of chances, and yeah, I think Chelsea are just a better team in terms of quality than Bournemouth at the moment, with Bournemouth still waiting for players getting back into full fitness and players getting acclimatized after joining them and stuff. You have 2-1 for Chelsea, so do you think Bournemouth has a chance in this game, or do you think it's the same as West Ham against Man City, that it's just going to be a pretty easy win for Chelsea? It's just not going to be like a blowout?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think for me, it feels like one of those sort of games where Chelsea are 2-0 up, and then all of a sudden, Chelsea will concede. So, yeah, that's how I view it. And Solanke being the one who obviously loves scoring against his former clubs and stuff like that, or getting some sort of involvement. So, yeah, I think Chelsea are going to edge it out. Out of all the big teams, Chelsea are the ones that are the least to surprise me with the loss in that regards. So, but I think there's a little bit more pressure on Poch after the random ass loss to Nottingham Forest. I mean, of course, he conceded to a great Swede in Malanga, but yeah, no one could have figured that being the result beforehand. So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's, yeah, like you said, it's going to be a fun game. I think Chelsea will pull it out. And then we have Everton against Arsenal. And yeah, I've said that I've backed against West Ham, and it has sort of been a jinx, because I've not gotten a single result right for West Ham, because they keep outperforming my expectations. But Everton, you are kind of doing the opposite. You always expect them to win, and then they lose. And once again, you expect them to win, this time against Arsenal. 2-1 against Arsenal you have. What do you have to say for yourself? Is it just purely this is the same result as last year? Everton has like an edge over Arsenal. Is that why? Do you think, like, how are you possibly going with Everton beating Arsenal?
Let me put it this way. Everton in the last 5 against Arsenal at Goodison Park have not lost. It's 4 wins and 1 draw. If Dyche fucks that up, sorry for cursing, dice out.
Okay, fair enough. Tough task. Yeah, I think it's going to be a simple win for
No,
Arsenal.
I mean, I can explain myself a bit further.
Okay.
I think this is genuinely like with anything a boiling point, which is a real shame that it's like the boiling point should have been losing to Fulham at home, but
Mm.
we lost to Fulham, we lost to can't even think Aston Villa, screwed up against Sheffield. Like there's just so many stupid
Lost against
results.
Wolves.
Yeah, I lost. Yeah, I lost to Wolves at home when we could have easily won that game as well,
You should
and
have
we
beaten
should
both
have
Fulham
won.
and Wolves,
Yeah,
especially.
all these type of things. I think this feels like this was, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Dyche's first game the game
Yeah.
against Arsenal? I could
Yeah.
have, yeah. So, um,
McNeil to
yeah.
Tarkowski.
Ah! So, yeah, and now that McNeil seems to be fit and, all this type of things, and Beto looks so good. It
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me if this is how Beto gets his first Premier League goal and win. So, yeah, I'm not expecting a win, but I can
Expecting a good
see a
game.
win.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a good game, and I
Yeah.
expect that Everton showed their true colors, even if that results in a loss. I want it to be a good loss. None of the losses
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the Fulham one and the
Wolves one. You have looked good,
Wolves
but it's
one, yeah, we've
just
looked good, but it's something's been missing, and
yeah.
I think that something might have been the fact that Danjuma was a bit miffed,
Mm-hmm.
McNeil was miffed, and the lack of Calvert-Lewin, who's either dead or alive. You can never know until kickoff. So him and Beta together could be very interesting, and that's why I think we might be able to do something. And also because there's news that Zach has been playing through injury, and if that's the
Mm.
case, best believe Tarkowski's going to break his legs.
Maybe. Or Pickford. We've seen Pickford in the past as well destroy some careers. But yeah, to be fair to Everton, I think Everton are going to be fine this season. I don't think you're going to go down. I think you have just too much quality. You've shown already in these games. You should have had way more points so far. Fulham don't Fulham have 6 points and you have 0? I think it should be the other way around. Really, at 1 point. Yeah. Sorry, you drew against Sheffield United. I'd be remiss to not remember that. But yeah, I think Everton will be fine. Like we're gonna look at the expected numbers the first 4 game weeks pretty soon as well, and Everton have done decently. So yeah, I think Everton will be fine. I just don't think this is the game week to start it, because I think Arsenal, riding off the high, especially from beating Man United in injury time, I think they're going to push on and finally look like a proper team again now. So yeah, I'm guessing 2-0 for Arsenal, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Everton can get a result there either. But yeah, final game, kind of the most boring game as well, saving the worst for last, I guess. Nottingham Forest at home against Burnley. It is kind of interesting in terms of, before the season, we sort of expected Burnley to be like a fun, interesting team that could get a result somewhere. And so far, they haven't really been that. They've been pretty poor. They had some tough matches, to be fair, but they've also looked pretty susceptible to concede a lot of goals. And Nottingham Forest, on the other hand, have looked kind of more solid than we expected them to be. And they've been getting results and stuff, and nearly getting a result against Man United as well. So we've both gone with the same result here, 2-1 for Nottingham Forest. So how do you see this game? Do you think Burnley has a chance? Is this finally the game Burnley can break through? Or do you think it's just Company's sort of out of his depth in the Premier League? What do you think of Burnley in general in terms of the Premier League and their chances of staying up?
Not very good. I think I don't even think it's Company who's out of depth. It's just, being the best in the Championship doesn't mean that it's going to be automatic success in the Prem. And yes, of course, Fulham were a good example of that, a bad example of that, because they did well to get through in the playoffs and then absolutely had a wonderful first season. But even then, they sort of fell under estimations in the sense that some people were thinking they'd finish higher than they did. So yeah, it's a shame. I think there's also the lack of certain players being there from, like Maddison and all these type of stuff. I'm really stupid if I don't know this, but Nathan Tella is not there anymore either, right?
Yeah,
so two of their biggest reasons why they did so well last year.
Yep.
So, which is crazy considering the fact that Chelsea tried to sell Maddison to Burnley and he turned Burnley down. So,
Yeah.
yeah, they're a proper sinking ship. I don't have any belief in them for the season. Things could change maybe with a manager change or with some cash injection in January, but like, no. Sadly, I just think Burnley don't have the necessary steps to be a Premier League team next season. But this is the game where they need to sort of show
Yeah.
signs of life. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did, because again, Nottingham Forest are really inconsistent. Like they'll absolutely win against Chelsea and score against United and all this type of stuff, but still screw it up somehow. So I don't know. I still think they're going to win, though. I just don't think they're going to do it so convincingly. We say after it ends 5-0, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'll see Nottingham Forest 5-0 win at any time really in the Premier League, but yeah, I think it's simply just down to backing the home team really in this game. That's why I've gone with Nottingham Forest personally. And from an FPL perspective, some of us at least will have, you don't have him anymore because you wildcarded last week, but some of us will have Matt Turner in goal potentially. So that will be like interesting to see if he starts at all. That's the first thing, because there are news that I can't even pronounce his name, Odysseas something, the former number one goalkeeper for Benfica. There are reports that he's going to be the starting goalkeeper now, at least at some point. So yeah, at first it's going to be interesting to see which goalkeeper is starting this game, and if it is Turner, it's going to be interesting to see if he keeps his clean sheet. But we both have Nottingham Forest conceding, because I think Burnley, they've scored pretty much every game so far. They didn't score against City, but they've been like pretty potent offensively. And Lyle Foster as well is someone that hasn't been talked about enough when it comes to the double game week. I know they have Newcastle in one of those double game week fixtures, and that's why people are looking at Luton instead, because they have Everton rather than Newcastle. But I think Foster has looked really good so far, and he's like one of the players that I've really taken a liking to so far. But yeah, that's it for the predicted results. Now let's get into more FPL stuff and the future, more than just Game Week 5. We're going to look beyond Game Week 5 as well on the fixture ticker. And like I said, we have some numbers, the expected goal numbers and expected goal conceded numbers from the first 4 game weeks. There is also an asterisk next to the names of Burnley and Luton here, or next to the numbers of Burnley and Luton, and that's because they haven't played 4 games. So just to make it more even numbers, or like comparable numbers, I did like the average expected goals and the average expected goals conceded per game, and just added it to the total. So they have pretty much 4 games sort of in there, and yeah, Burnley's numbers are not too good, and Burnley's offensive numbers are not too good, and Luton's defensive numbers are not too good, because they're both in the bottom 3 for those numbers. But yeah, before we get to the numbers though, we have to talk about the double game week, because that's like the big standout thing here. Double game week 7, we have Luton, who are now top of the whole fixture ticker, because they have that double game week on top of having some really good fixtures in game week 5 and 6. Are there any Luton players at all that are of interest to you, or are you just completely disregarding them totally?
I mean, obviously, it's Kabore. I really liked what I saw of him last year. Luton suck.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
He was benched last game as well.
Exactly. So, Morris, interesting. I liked what I've seen of him. Showed a lot of grit and determination, and why a lot of people picked him in sort of their earliest drafts and all this type of stuff, even though they were just kidding themselves. I like the look of him, but other than that, they're to me like the complete jumbo. So as we say in Scandinavian languages, they're the darlings to get relegated and all this type of stuff. I would avoid. I don't care that they have a double game week, especially considering the fact that it's against 2 teams that are in the relegation scrap with them currently anyways. So yeah, avoid defensive players at the very least. Carlton Morris, definitely keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I'm sitting on Issa Kabore myself, and I feel pretty good about having him. I wouldn't add him if I didn't have him, or probably we'll get to another Luton player when we come to the wildcard team, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with having Kabore, and I can see if he starts in Game Week 5 and Game Week 6. If he starts in both those games, I'll feel pretty confident that he'll start in both games in Game Week 7 as well. And then I'll probably start him just because they have two really easy fixtures. And yeah, I'll just look at them compared to the other defenders that I have, I guess. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. Carlton Morris, maybe, but at the same time, they have to show something in Game Week 5 and Game Week 6 for me to buy him in Game Week 7. I'm not going to buy anyone before Game Week 7, I think, from Luton or Burnley for that matter, unless they show something in these next two game weeks. So yeah, they'll kind of get their audition now. Luton against Fulham and Wolverhampton, two really easy matches. If they look decent in those games, finally we'll see them against some worse or some easier opponents. If they do look good in those two games, then maybe I'll consider them for Game Week 7. But other than that, I'm just going to keep Kabore and potentially start him in Game Week 7. But yeah, when it comes to Burnley, their fixtures are just not good enough, so I don't really think I'll consider any of them. Maybe Foster if he keeps looking good and I need to downgrade Alvarez, for example. But yeah, I wouldn't really go with Burnley players either because they haven't shown anything really so far either. The other interesting thing about this fixture ticker now is Newcastle, because they've gone from pretty far down at the start of the season to pretty high up now. They're like second best. It's only because of the Luton double game week fixture I think that they are like clearly number one. But Newcastle, are there any players we briefly touched on Trippier at the start of this podcast, but are there any Newcastle players at all that are of interest to you? Like, which players stand out if that's the case?
Yeah, for me, on the defense, just think Tonali, Harvey Barnes, and Isak or Wilson if Wilson stops coming from off the bench. If Wilson ends up becoming the starter, then he's always an exciting prospect.
Anthony Gordon?
Yes, definitely Anthony Gordon as well.
He's starting now over Barnes.
Yeah, which I think it's a strange one, right? I think both should be playing, but it's really weird considering they're both in the same position. So tough one, but I think Barnes. This might sound like I'm just hating on him because he left Everton, but I do think Barnes is better than Gordon. But Gordon, like if you watch the Newcastle show on Netflix or Amazon, there's so much belief from Newcastle with Anthony Gordon. Like they think he's going to be the next big thing and all this type of stuff. And fair enough, he definitely has the talent and quality. But I think Barnes is just criminally underrated. I mean, when we were doing the podcast last year, I said he'd outscore Maddison and all this type of stuff. And just because he's just really good at shooting, like it's fun to have more of these wingers who like to be consistent. I think Harvey Barnes is a very consistent player, so I think he's definitely on the look. I think Denali's finally getting to play with some freedom compared to his Milan days. I mentioned this in the past, and I still think that's the case. I think he's very interesting, especially with this price point. He might be a very easy way for you to then double up with him and Isak and all this type of stuff, because I think Isak in these run of games is the type of things where he hits his purple patch and starts scoring every game. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of offensive players from Newcastle, but no defenders. Are you not interested in?
I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all. I don't trust them defensively.
If you look at the expected goal conceded, they have decent numbers, even though they had really tough opposition so far.
I just think they're just gonna concede. Like, I don't know. Maybe they'll iron it out, but I think defensively is where they're the weakest. So that's why I once Livramento probably is not the word I'm looking for. Once he potentially starts playing, tongue twister. I think maybe things will shore up, but I don't know, man. I just don't like what I've seen of them defensively. That's why I recommend the other guys. And there's 3 good home games there.
They have really good fixtures, especially those Sheffield United, Burnley, and Crystal Palace, who don't really perform that well offensively. There's a case to be made there.
But I still think that, if you're going to go for anyone, go for Botman. But I think they're a bit overpriced. And I also think that they've been playing a little bit too kamikaze football in the sense that I don't think obviously they probably do care about clean sheets, but in the sense that nothing has shown that sort of sign of life like they had in the past. So yeah, just go for it, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Botman versus Shar versus Trippier, but you picked it for me. So we can talk more about Newcastle as well, especially defensively next game, because I think the game is Brentford. We both had Brentford scoring 2 goals, so we don't really expect anything defensively in that game. But after that, I think there's something to
Yeah.
be said about defensive Newcastle players. So maybe next week's podcast we'll talk more about Trippier and stuff like that. And we'll
Hmm.
get to see them play against Brentford as well and see if they look any better now after international break. And also to see what they do in the Champions League as well. That's going to be interesting. I don't know if they play on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, but yeah, we'll get to that eventually. Yeah, we also have Man United and Chelsea, who are kind of earlier. They were pretty popular teams around Game Week 2, Game Week 3. And now, after Game Week 4, people are kind of cooling off on them, but they still have good fixtures. So how do you feel about holding players like Bruno Fernandes, Rashford, Jackson, Sterling? Do you think those guys are still viable because they have good fixtures, or are you kind of out on these teams, or do you have faith in those teams still?
I mean, I've said I was impressed with how Poch has reinvigorated Sterling. I think Sterling's been super unlucky not to get more points in since the start of the season. So I've got all faith in Chelsea to sort of fix things, and I think that's going to be one of the main reasons why I'm going to keep them. It would have been a different scenario if the Aston Villa and the Arsenal game were away matches. Then I'd be like, that's not great. Because they're both home as well in both games. I think Sterling might be a keeper for a bit. Chilwell, left winger, Neymar, just absolutely bombing it down the left wing. So yeah, I think I'm going to stick with Chelsea, and I think Chelsea's sort of form will change. You just look at their XG as well and their XGC as well. It's it's not bad. It's not bad numbers, and I think they've been kind of lucky as well. It seems like the Sanka household supporting the blue teams have been pretty unlucky this year.
Yeah. And then finally, on the other end of the fixture ticker, we have teams like Arsenal and Brighton, who are really popular teams with a lot of players that people own in FPL, but they have
Mhm.
really tough fixtures. And especially Arsenal, I think it's interesting because they have decent away fixtures, but they have tough home fixtures. And that's sort of why we'll get to the weekly wildcard draft next. That's sort of why I had to drop Saka from the weekly wildcard draft, actually, because he's, at least last season, and I think just through his career as well, he's been pretty poor away from home. So seeing as he has his easier fixtures away from home and then tougher fixtures at home, I'm not so sure about Saka going forward. I still have him in my team. I'm not looking to sell in this game week personally, but do we need to consider potentially selling Saka at some point, because there are so many good midfielders?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, it's one of the ways that I can look into getting Son or Maddison,
Mm-hmm.
easy swap. And considering the fact the Spurs have easier matches going forward,
Yeah.
it seems like the more sensible thing to do. Or shoring up money to get a Newcastle and, an extra Chelsea or, whatever. It gives you more flexibility to change towards teams that have more favorable games. Arsenal have crumbled under the pressure in some of these big matches, especially against City. City, they're they're whipping boys in that regards. But Spurs, they tend to usually beat at the Emirates, so I would say just hold with Saka for the time being. But if for whatever reason he's not playing against Everton, sell, 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 sell.
Yeah, I think Saka for me is pretty easy to just hold him for these next 3 game weeks, and then Game Week 8, he seems like a pretty easy selling point to get Son in, because I think the next 3 fixtures it's pretty even between him and Son in terms of fixtures. But then when you look at Game Week 8 and Game Week 9, Arsenal have 2 tough fixtures on paper at least. Chelsea, we don't really know how good they are going to be, but two tough fixtures on paper, and Spurs have 2 fantastic, probably the 2 best fixtures you can ask for. So I think that's like a pretty easy point to get potentially both Maddison and Son if you don't have them already, because they're going to be really popular now. But especially Game Week 8 and Game Week 9, I feel like that's the week to jump off of Saka and potentially get Son, especially if you're wildcarding as well. Like you can get Saka back for like Gameweek 10 and beyond, because they have some pretty good home fixtures after that. But that's pretty far into the future, so we'll talk more about that in future podcasts. But next up, we have the weekly wildcard draft, which is something that I do every week. I draft what I think is the best squad to have in FPL going forward in the next 4 to 5 game weeks. And this is what I've come up with this week. I have a lot of new names, a lot of big names dropping out. So which one of this is the first question I'm going to ask. Which one of the names that have dropped out since the last weekly wildcard draft do you think is the harshest? Like, which one would you have kept out of all the red names you can see right next to you here? Obviously, I can go through the names as well. It's Saka, Sterling, Nicholas Jackson, Fernandes, Alvarez, Guardiola, and Jared Branthwaite. We have to mention him as well.
You want my serious answer or the joking answer first?
Joking answer first. I know what you're going to say.
Branthwaite, you piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I have two.
One. You can only say one.
I know, but I'm going to say two.
You're going to say one.
No, fine. Sterling.
Okay.
Which seems like a wild one, because I think the Alvarez one makes sense considering the fact that Argentina played in Bolivia and all this type of stuff.
He played 85 minutes as well in Bolivia.
Yeah. So it's going to be a tough go around to try and get him fit and all this type of stuff. He also wasn't very good against Bolivia, but that could just say about Argentina playing away in Bolivia in the first place. Of course, it took a Messi free kick to win the game, the GOAT. But I think it's really harsh with Sterling, considering the fact that we've been singing his praises from the get-go. And against Bournemouth as well. How dare you? His favorite team to score against.
I know. I'm keeping him in my own team as well. And like I always say in these weekly wildcard draft videos, picking midfielders is the toughest task of all, because there's so many good midfielders to choose from. I really like Saka, I really like Sterling, I really like Fernandes as well, but they're all dropping out to make room for Son, Salah, and Diaby going forward. So yeah, I think it's just really tough to choose midfielders. It's just King, Mbeumo, and probably Salah going forward as well. I think he's going to be, especially if you're wildcarding, you're going to need to get Salah in around Game Week 9, because he has such good fixtures from that point on. It's going to be really tough to get him. If you used your wildcard already and you don't have Salah, it's going to be really tough to get him in. So I don't think he's a priority buy if you're not on a wildcard, but if you're using your wildcard and you don't have the wildcard in Game Week 9 or Game Week 10, I think Salah kind of has to be there. So that's why he's included in the team as well. But yeah, so you said Sterling for which player was harsh to drop out, but which player do you feel I don't know how to ask this question, but do you have any thoughts about the players coming in? We have Son, Salah, Diaby, Morris, Cash, Archer, and Giles coming in. Do you have any thoughts about these guys in general, good or bad?
I mean, I like obviously Son, I like Maddison, I like Diaby. Yeah, the silence should be just me. That's it. I don't like Cash at all. I don't yes. Okay. Like Cash,
controversial.
It is controversial because a lot of people are going to jump on the bandwagon because he is very good offensively, but I just don't trust Aston Villa defensively.
Okay.
With the Mings injury as well, and yes, I don't rate Mings as highly as some other people do, but it's shown that he is actually considerably important for them and all this type of stuff. And that's why
his strengths, I think, play really well into Aston Villa's weaknesses. So I think that's why he's kind of super important for Aston Villa. Even though he has a lot of deficiencies as a footballer, his greatest strengths being a really good header of the ball is something that they lack when he's not there. So yeah, I think that's why he's so important for them. And he's a big figure for them as well. Like, you can't really go against that either. But yeah, go on with Cash. You don't like Matty Cash.
Like, I like Matty Cash, I think, because he's sort of like the fun fullback to have. Like, one game week he scores twice, the other game week he scores his own goal and all this type of stuff. So, like, for that reason, I think he's fun, and he's relatively cheap. So I shouldn't be that harsh on him. I just don't think that Villa are good enough defensively. That's been a worry, but of course, who cares about that? The reason you have him is for defensive traits, sure. But there are going to be times like when Estupinian, who got no offensive returns, then didn't keep the clean sheet and all this type of stuff. So, it's just I personally prefer someone else, but I think it's a good. I mean, considering the fact that you have a Estupinian, Adobe, and Chilwell, it doesn't mean that Cash will play every single game and you play him in the favorable game. So fair enough for that reason, sure. I don't rate Giles, and Morris I'm cool with, I guess.
Yeah. It's just for the double game week, really.
Yeah,
They're going
yeah,
just
I
gonna stay
know,
on the
I
bench
know,
pretty much every game week, and then they have the double game week where potentially they could be really good. I think
I
Giles as
know.
well. I think Giles was like one of the players because he was with Wolverhampton before when the game launched, and he was like the one that I was really hoping was going to be 4.0 because I knew he was going to take a lot of set pieces and get a lot of attacking involvements. He's had a lot of crosses for the first like 3 game weeks. I think he has like 30 crosses or something. Takes free kicks and stuff as well, set pieces for Luton. So I think he's just like one of those guys who could go down in like FPL folklore as like one of those double game week heroes potentially. So that's why I have him, because I think he's
Fair.
just an interesting player. So I guess, but interesting to hear your opposition to Cash, because I'm kind of unsure about Cash as well. Like at some points I was just like, yeah, he has to be in there. He's so offensive. He's basically playing as a right winger. Emery has said that he's playing him as a right winger and stuff as well. But at the same time, like I said, Aston Villa defensively haven't been the best. And the fact that Moreno is coming back now as well. He's back in training for Aston Villa. And if he starts playing on the left, I think Cash might be the one to drop down and Moreno being the one to push up. So Moreno might be the pick in the future if I'm going with a defensive player from Aston Villa. But especially seeing as they have tougher fixtures in the next 2 game weeks or the next 3 game weeks with Chelsea and Brighton, maybe you should stay away from Cash. But that's also what I said. Like if we get news that Alvarez is starting against West Ham, you can easily downgrade Cash to someone like Tavares or Cabore, for example, as well, and upgrade Carlton Morris, for example, to Julian Alvarez if you want to do that potentially, or upgrade someone like Diaby to Saka or Sterling potentially to get the money there as well. So you could play around, and especially if you have more money in the bank than the 100 million which I've used to base this team on, you can do something different there, I guess. But yeah, that's the team in general. Any other comments before we move on, or do you think it's a good team, bad team?
No, it's a good team. Interesting with the Solid Madison double up.
Yeah.
Yep, let's go.
Yeah, fair enough. And if you want all the in-depth thoughts about all these players, I did that in the weekly Wildcard draft video, which you can watch on this YouTube channel. I'll link it in the description as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the weekly Wildcard draft. So let's move on to the next game week 5, and let's look at your plans. You have 0.6 in the bank. You used your wildcard last game week 4. And now we're going into game week 5, and you have some interesting decisions to make. So the transfers you've mentioned for me is either just standing pat. This was what you said was the most likely, just sticking with your team, sticking with your guns, and having the same team. You did mention potentially selling Sterling. You mentioned now that you would potentially keep him in the weekly wildcard draft, but you also said that you might move from him to a Spurs midfielder, and that would be Maddison because you can't afford Sterling to Son. But if you really do want Son, you could sell Saka as well. We mentioned that Saka might be someone you could potentially sell to get Son. So those are the 3 options you've listed for me. But is that what you're going with? What is your current thinking after thinking about it and after talking in this podcast as well?
Yeah,
And I can see, yeah, go on.
Son and Madison are they're looking more and more attractive every day. So yeah, I mean, it is pissing me off that I don't have a Spurs asset in terms of midfield. Of course, I have Adogi.
You have Adogi, who's basically the mixture of Maddison and Son put together, really. So yeah.
Yeah. And I benched last week, so not going to do that again. And I have a real headache in terms of Flecken and potentially going -4 to get rid of him. That's cute. Yeah, there are aspects to my team that I really like and aspects that I really hate. So yeah, I might go -4 to get rid of Wissa as well, but I would give him the one more game because he got super lucky in the previous game. So because that's the thing, right? Like I don't want too many players that play for the same team as well. So just branching out with Wissa and making him into Isak somehow, and maybe going Saka and Maddison and Wissa for Isak would be like a fun way of doing things. I don't know if I have enough money for that, but if I do, swell. So that's potentially something that I'd look into. I could just stand pat and just do the transfers next week instead. And well, I'll have clearer ideas of what needs to be done and etc. But generally speaking, pretty happy with the team. I think Bruno Fernandes is in good form. I got slated for picking him over Rashford, but sort of like you said, Rashford against Arsenal, he always scores, and that's the only thing. And then I wouldn't have enough money to then transfer people out and etc. So I prefer this setup. I think the team looks good, generally speaking. I just think that next week will be more fun for my team as well, because it's going to be some easier fixtures as well.
Yeah, I think personally you should potentially stand pat. I think that would probably be what I'd do in your position as well. I think you have a really good team. You obviously just did your wildcard, so you should have a really good team as well. And I think goalkeeper, you don't really just set and forget, really. Just stick with Flecken. Newcastle probably not going to keep a clean sheet, but maybe he saves a penalty. Maybe Wilson comes on and misses a penalty for once. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. But the other question I want to ask you is about captaincy, because you mentioned in previous game weeks, and in game week 2 you actually went against Haaland as captain and went with Salah as captain. Is that something you're thinking about this time around as well, or are you just going to stick with Haaland as captain and no questions asked? Or is it potentially dependent on who you bring in? Would you captain a Spurs player if you bring them in potentially? Like, what's your captaincy thinking?
Yeah, if I bring in Son or Maddison, it's like you said in the past, it's stupid for you to bring someone in if you're not going to captain them. So, or if they're captain worthy, it's stupid to, or
Yeah,
potentially if you go mine.
I think my thinking is, if you're selling someone like Sterling or Saka to get another player, then you should probably captain them because you need really good reasons to sell Sterling or Saka, and that reason would be to captain the player you bring in. So yeah, that's my line of thinking. But yeah, go on with captaincy. Are you considering Haaland or just Haaland, or potentially someone else?
I mean, it's the two players that I have. It's either Haaland or Salah for me personally. Brighton they're that X factor. Anything can happen, which is why I'm a bit too chicken shit to captain Bruno. Haaland has a good record against West Ham, generally speaking. So of course, I'll triple captain him just to ruin your life. Salah, on the other hand, has been consistent, but he hasn't exploded the way I know he can. So I think, sadly, even though it's super boring, and even though if I had not captain Haaland last week, that would have been a complete disaster, I'm going to captain Haaland.
Yeah, and we know also from Haaland last season, where he started the season with 2 goals, 0 goals, 1 goal, 3 goals. The 5th game was 3 goals again, double hat-trick. Yeah. So if he's keeping that pattern up, he's going to score a hat-trick against West Ham, which hopefully he doesn't, because I want West Ham to pull off the upset there. But I think, like you, I think Haaland is probably the best captaincy option. I do kind of like the Spurs options, because Sheffield United are just that bad, really. There is a universe where West Ham put up a really good fight against City, and Spurs absolutely obliterates Sheffield United like they did Burnley. So I sort of see this temptation that we're going with a captaincy for one of the Spurs players. I've also said that I think Maddison is sort of the better pick in this game week, but that's also why I'm sort of against captaining the Spurs players, because I feel like Maddison is sort of, his ceiling isn't as high as Son, so that's why it's not as fun to captain him, I guess. He could pull off like an 18-pointer. He did that last season against Nottingham Forest, I think. But yeah, I think Haaland is just like the safest pick, so that's why I'm probably going to go with him myself. But I am considering Salah as well. And if I were to bring in a Spurs midfielder, then maybe. But I think Haaland is just a safe option, really. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts in regards to that. Let's move on to Chemo's potential transfers. And last game week, he brought in Jared Bowen, and now he's looking to sell Jared Bowen because he is really wanting to get Heung-min Son, obviously, because that's pretty much the talk of the town. And Chemo has more than enough. Like I said, he sold Salah for Bowen, so he has more than enough money in the bank to do pretty much anything that he wants. So one of his predicted transfers or potential transfers is Jared Bowen to Son, like I said. The other would be just to upgrade, because his bench is pretty weak. So upgrading one of the bench players to someone like Isak, which is someone that Kimo has spoken about a lot. We all really like, obviously, you're Swedish. I've always been a massive fan of Isak, and Kimo's a big fan as well. That's the other move he's thinking about, Mubama to Isak. So looking at those two potential transfers, what transfer is the best one for you? Because obviously if he brings in Isak for Mubama, he could still bench Bowen and keep Bowen for the future game weeks as well.
Yeah, I think the more pressing out of the two is obviously Isak, simply because he already has the one out of the two. So I'd personally go with Isak out of Isak or Son in that regards. But I wouldn't hate both. It'd be fun transfers. I think it would be very against the grain to double up on, what everyone did in the beginning, where it was like, oh, Saka and Martinelli, or Saka, which I did, for example, and Saka, Odegaard, or Martinelli, Odegaard. So it'd be fun to see someone doing that with Spurs, considering that they're flying. But yeah, I think Isak is the more pressing one, considering the fact that they have the really good fixtures and because he already has Maddison.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I think also if I was Kimo, maybe just want to go like super like opposite, or not opposite really, because both Maddison and Son are really, really interesting picks, or players that people want to bring into the team. But maybe just go gung-ho with Spurs and go with players that are not as highly owned currently. Isak is not that highly owned either, but just bank on Spurs, just destroying Sheffield United, go for that result. That is tempting to me, but at the same time, I think Bowen, he doesn't have the best fixtures now. He has City now and then Liverpool and the next game week. But pretty soon, West Ham will have pretty good fixtures, and I think Bowen will be a really good pick eventually. So I think selling Bowen, especially with the bench being as bad as it is, Bayer, who has a double game week in every 7, to be fair, but Mubama doesn't play at all for West Ham. Baldock plays for Sheffield United, and then Bayer, who plays for Burnley, who concede every time, and then Pickford as well. His bench is just not up to par, so I would probably prefer upgrading the bench rather than selling someone like Bowen, especially seeing as he has so much money in the bank as well. Make use of the money in the bank, really. So yeah, unless he really wants to captain Son, then unless he really wants to captain Son, I'd probably go with the striker upgrade. I'm not 100% sold on Isak personally myself, so I probably wouldn't bring in Isak myself just because of the Wilson Isak thing. I've always said I'm pretty much staying away from those guys until one of them gets injured. Then I'll buy the other one, because they're just in the other person's way every single time. So, but yeah, Isak has so much quality. We know he's going to play most of the minutes, at least for Newcastle. So I don't hate the pick, but yeah, I think Mubama to Isak is a fun move you could go for. But at the same time, it is also tempting to go with double Spurs and just back that as well. So yeah, some fun things that Kimo can do to differentiate himself. So that's what he likes to do as well. I wouldn't put it past him to do like a -4 or -8 or something, because Kimo can do that from time to time, which is also why it's kind of fun to talk about his team. Kimo, obviously, he's not on this podcast now because he doesn't have time to do the podcasts all the time this season, but he was one of the founding members of the FPL Scope, so that's why we always talk about his team, and it's just fun to see what he's doing every week. So yeah, I always ask him what he's going to do. And for captaincy, I think he's just going with Haaland. It seems like maybe he captains Son. That's the decision he has to do, whether he brings in Son and whether he captains him. Or captains Maddison, for that matter. Maybe he does that. I think he actually has Nick Jackson. I have the Saka as vice captain here, but I think maybe Nick Jackson is one in the team that he sent me. I think Nick Jackson is actually the vice captain, because he still really likes Jackson as well. But yeah, that's pretty much Kimo's team. And then the final team we're going to discuss is the manager of the week. The manager of the week for Game Week 4 was Justin Long, and that's why we're going to talk about his team. And it is very similar to my team. There's just one difference, really, and that's Bowen compared to... I have Sterling rather than Bowen. Other than that, it's pretty much the same starting 11 that I have this game week. And coincidentally, that's why I think potentially he should sell Bowen, because he doesn't have as much money in the bank as Kimo does, and he has a better bench. He has Saliba on the bench, who could potentially get a clean sheet against Everton. So that's why I think with Bowen's tough fixtures coming up, I think you could get a better team that way. One of the transfers that I've said to him is going Bowen to Sterling and have the exact same team as me. But yeah, at the same time, I also really like Diaby. Diaby was in the weekly wildcard draft, which Sterling was not. I think Derby has really good fixtures. I think, like we said, looked at the start of this podcast as well with the Talisman versus focal point thing. When they play against the likes of Brighton and stuff, I think Derby can still be really good. I think they have Brighton, and let's go back to the fixture checker a little bit. Aston Villa, they have Chelsea away, which could also be one of those games where you can hit them on the counter and score goals against Chelsea and their high line. And they have Brighton, so I think those games are really good for Diaby as well, even though they're tougher fixtures on paper. So yeah, I really like the look of Bowen to Diaby, but I also obviously have Sterling in my own team, and I think Sterling can score against Bournemouth. So those are the two transfers that I'm proposing for the manager of the week. But do you have any other suggestions? This is obviously a team with 0.6 in the bank, one free transfer. What would you look to do? There's also the thing of he has 3 City players, Foden, Haaland, Alvarez, and like we said, Alvarez might be benched, so maybe you look for team use and see if you could bench Alvarez and start Saliba. That's something that I'm looking into as well. But other than that, what are your thoughts about this team and what you would do if you were in this position? Maybe you just stand pat as well. Who knows? But what is your decision? You could also actually, if Alvarez starts, you can do Saliba in for Bowen and have a fully fit team there as well. So a lot of options. I've talked way too long now. So Kevin, give me your input on this team.
Yeah, I think it's good to either stand pat and get the double transfer and just potentially either go. I still think Bowen can score, so
yeah,
it's not the worst.
Hopefully,
worst shout. But yeah, if you're gonna get in anyone, I'd say it'd be easier to get Sterling in over Diaby simply because you want Sterling against Bournemouth, and if you want to switch down, it's always easier to switch down if Sterling gets a price increase and stuff like that. So yeah, I think both transfers work. It's just a sense of feeling. Chelsea have good fixtures going forward, so and Sterling's been the focal point. So yeah, I think my preference is Sterling, but I know how good Diaby is. I helped write the reviews and stuff like that, and yeah, like he's quality. He's currently a 99 player on my FIFA Ultimate Team, which is completely dead considering FIFA or EA Sports FC 24 is coming out next week. So, but Diaby's sick. So it's just a coin toss. Coin toss. Literally, it's 50-50. Go on feeling. I think both players have essentially won the eye test. It's just a question of which one you're feeling more.
Yeah, and that's the question I'll put out to the viewers as well. Which player would you choose, Diaby or Sterling? Please write down in the comments who you would prefer, or any other comments about this podcast in general, or the FPL Scope in general, or Kevin, or Everton, or whatever you want to talk about, really. Comment down below, and we'll be sure to answer as well. But yeah, if you want to be Manager of the Week, you, Kevin, you could be Manager of the Week because you are part of the FPL Scope Mini League. I can be the Manager of the Week. I think I was actually really close to being the Manager of the Week if I had just not done the -4 that I did. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about how you, the viewer, can get into this Manager of the Week thing, which we do every week here on this podcast. And we basically pick out the manager that had the highest score from the past game week. So that could be you if you want to join our mini league. As you can see above me here, you have the mini league code, which is V9JT0D. So if you join the mini league, you could be the manager of the week and be featured on the podcast as well. So with that is the whole podcast really. And as always, I leave Kevin with the final word. So what do you have to say for the final word this time around, Kevin?
You're not going to be happy with this. You're going to be like, oh, we might have to blurt that out. Fuck Ben Crellin, man. Or Bren Credin, as I'm going to be calling him, because I saw that tweet about Isak getting his rest because he's essentially alluding to the fact that Sweden were out of the Euros. So when England got out of the Euros, I'm going to tweet not any single other English person that I know. Him. Specifically him due to the tweet about Isak. Fuck you. Thank you for all the great stuff that you do for us. I love the fixture stuff. Don't get me wrong. But don't tweet about Sweden, especially after a loss that fucking stings. Fuck you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.